Today I was prepared to speak to you in French, but I guess now I have to shift to Spanish because Argentina is winning so far. But since my Spanish is not that well, so I'm going to stick to English and Armenian since it's a tight score. So I'm happy to see all of you here today. Today we are still in the season of Advent, and we are preparing to welcome the incarnation of our Lord Jesus Christ, which we celebrate in the Feast of Nativity. And as in the past few weeks, I have been saying that the Church prepares us to embrace the incarnation of the Lord in a deep spiritual way, and this happens through the biblical readings and reflections. Today, we also have a very profound reading, a set of teachings that comes to us from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus speaking directly to his disciples, he gives them a series of teachings that have to do with how they live in the community. We have to remember that our life as Christians, we are called to live in the community. There is this evangelical notion that we need to have a personal relationship with God. To some degree, there's truth to there. But our orthodox understanding is that God calls us to be part of his community. And in order for us to live in that community of faith, there are certain things that we need to do. So the teaching today starts with the direct words of Jesus Christ as he says, "Things that cause people to sin are bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come." When we go to the original Greek text, we see that Jesus is using a word that all of you know. He says the scandals are to happen. And when we hear the word scandal, we think about those things that we will read in the newspapers, that we will hear about them on television, and everyone will be scandalized. But when we examine the original meaning of the word, what Jesus is saying that when we cause somebody else to stumble and fall into sin, that is scandal. The words that he uses are very powerful. He says, it would be better for that person to be thrown into the sea. There's this one thing to live for myself, but I know that through my actions, through my words, and sometimes with my behavior and my thoughts, I can lead others to go astray. And when people who are not as strong in faith, they can see the scandalous behavior of someone, that causes them to sin. And Jesus is telling us, live in a way that you inspire others. But the core teaching comes in the following combination: rebuke and forgive. He says when your brother sins against you, you have to rebuke them. In other words, when someone hurts you, when someone hurts me, it is my responsibility to go and tell them, I am feeling hurt because of your actions, because of what you said, or because of your behavior. And if that person comes to you and says, I made a mistake, our responsibility as Christians is to forgive them. And to forgive them as often as they come and they apologize. This is the very basic teaching that guides our Christian lives, my brothers and sisters. And in order for us to do this, we need a combination of courage and gentleness. We need the courage to go and confront someone and tell them, your behavior is not right. And we need the gentleness to be able to forgive when that person says, I made a mistake. I made a bad choice. This is very important because there are some extremes in our lives. We sometimes have the difficulty of confronting a person, of identifying what is the mistake and telling them, about the hurtful behavior. The popular notion is sometimes we like to hide things under the rug. Sometimes we like to look the other way. Sometimes we like to pretend that it is okay. This is, on one hand, the mistake that happens. On the other hand, the mistake that happens is when people come and they ask for forgiveness, we pretend that we have forgiven them. But 10 years go by and we're still ruminating. We're still talking about what they did to us and how hurt we are. Jesus is telling us something very clear. Confront and then forgive. This is very important because look at it in our lives. Look at our family lives. If you come from a family where forgiveness was not easily attained, chances are there are some difficulties that you have created in your life. If a child growing up in a family, when they made a mistake, the parents would have really hard time giving that forgiveness to them, the child will learn that I need to be perfect. I cannot make a mistake because it is very difficult for my parents or my surrounding to forgive me. But when we come from an environment where we are easily able to communicate about wrongdoings and sins and mistakes and tell each other, your behavior was hurtful. And then we have the courage to say, I am sorry. Then emotionally and spiritually, we can become a healthier person. But take this to the next level, to the bigger level, to the community. It's not that easy to go and tell someone, I am feeling hurt. It's not that easy to constantly forgive someone who is repeating the same mistake. The disciples realized that it's not easy. And for that reason, they go to Jesus with a genuine plea. And they say, Lord, increase our faith. Because they know that to be able to do what Jesus is asking them to do, it is impossible for them to do it relying on their own strengths. Increase our faith. To which Jesus says, if you have the faith in the size of a mustard seed and tell this mulberry tree to be uprooted and go and fall into the sea, the mulberry tree will listen to you. Obviously, this is a hyperbole, and we will spend a minute trying to understand what Jesus says. You've seen the mustard seed, right? Some of you who have Dijon mustard in your fridges, they know the size. It's very tiny, small. And no, this parable is not about trying to eat more mustard to increase faith, because that will not help. What Jesus is saying that if your faith is small, but it has the potential to grow, then you are on the right path. The size of the faith doesn't matter, as long as we treat that faith as something dynamic and not as something static. Our faith needs to grow. And in order for our faith to grow, it requires our active involvement. It is ongoing work. Just like you put a small seed in the dirt, and after time, you see that seed growing into a little plant, into a shrub, or into a tree. And with that faith, you can do the impossible. The mulberry tree is a sign of something that is very solid, something that is irremovable. But Jesus says, with your faith, you can change something that is irremovable. The mulberry tree could be also a sign of sin. With your faith, you can eliminate sin from your life. And finally, Jesus speaks a short parable and gives a parable of a workman who is in the field, either tending the flock or plowing the earth. And after finishing the work, he comes home. Jesus says, do you think the master will tell this person, go rest now? No, the master will tell them, now you need to prepare my supper. This sounds like a harsh master. But when we try to dig deeper, we see that Jesus is telling us our faith needs to be holistic. And this is very important. We need to have a holistic approach to our faith. A lot of times we focus on one thing and we forget the rest. Maybe we're really good in praying. Maybe we're really good in reading the Bible every day. But when it comes to having good relationship with our neighbors, we can't do that. Or maybe when it comes to forgiving somebody, we always have a hard time forgiving someone. Only because we are really good with the Bible and we're not forgiving, we cannot claim that we are good Christians. Jesus is encouraging us to have a holistic approach. There are so many things in our life of faith that we need to be mindful of. And in order for us to do that, we need to be humble. The humility comes in the words of Jesus where he says, when you have done everything you were told to do, you should say, we are unworthy servants, we have only done our duty. This is only our duty. And this spirit of humility increases our faith. It teaches us how to forgive. Because this humility draws us near to Jesus. And when we go to Jesus, we see how humble he was. Two very important examples from the New Testament. One is the story of the woman who was caught in the act of adultery. Jesus was there. Everyone was there to condemn this woman. Everyone was there to kill her by stoning. And Jesus said, the one who is without sin, let them cast the first stone. And when everybody was gone, he looked at the sinful woman and said, go and sin no more. This is one of the greatest examples of forgiveness, where the woman did not go and did not formally apologize to Jesus. Another similar example is the story of Peter, who after denying Jesus 3 times, he just went back to Jesus. And Jesus asked him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? And after hearing the affirmative words of Peter, he restored him. When we receive the abundance forgiveness from Jesus, it becomes easier for us to forgive. Because we all are sinners. Some of us commit sins here and there occasionally, but someone like me is committing sins on a daily basis. And without the grace of God, we cannot survive. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, today's message or today's gospel reading is filled with so many different teachings. It requires us to have courage and to have gentleness, to be able to forgive and to do all of that with a spirit of humbleness.